What is going on, everyone? Welcome into the Brant Partial Show. So let's talk the New York Giants. New York Giants going to be a fascinating team this year. The big question mark is, what happens with Saquon Barkley? You're hearing a lot of reports. It was reported today that the Giants offered him $16 million or $13 million, and he reportedly wanted 13. He posted on Twitter that was cap, meaning that it was not true. So, yeah, what happens with Saquon Barkley? How does that unfold? I think the New York Giants are an interesting team. I think they had a good draft. I think they've drafted well. Brian Daboll, they've got a competent coach. So I think the Giants, they're in a position to get back to the playoffs this year. How do they match up against the Eagles? That's going to be tough. They lost both games to the Eagles. That's kind of a question. Do the Eagles continue to be the Achilles heel, if you will, for the Giants? So the Giants, what happens with Saquon Barkley? Do they continue to move in the right direction? Does Daniel Jones continue to play at a high level? Re-signed a lot of receivers in free agency, or re-signed some, did some work signing receivers in free agency. Paris Campbell, Isaiah Hodges, re-signed Darius Slayton. Darius Slayton, I thought was a guy that was going to continue to get better. He's kind of leveled off. He's been okay. But yeah, I had higher hopes for Darius Slayton, to be honest. But yeah, the Giants, the offensive line continue to get better. Just everything. Brian Daboll has kind of done everything that I thought that a good coach could do with the New York Giants. Develop Daniel. Well, with the exception of Daniel Jones, I thought Daniel Jones kind of was a lost cause, but he's developed Daniel Jones. He's improved the offensive line. He's got a healthy Saquon Barkley that was, was Barkley critical to the Giants winning games? No, but Barkley he's a really good running back. And, when he was healthy, he is for the most part, a difference maker. And, the Giants defensive line, Dexter Lawrence has become a superstar. And you got Leonard Williams. You bring in Jared Davis, that linebacker guy who's really just been very average in the NFL, especially this time in Detroit and with the Jets. But yeah, drafted Deonte Banks, a corner I like out of Maryland. So the Giants, there's pieces in place there that see if they can keep the ball rolling forward, and we'll see how the Giants do. I like listening to Brian Daboll's press conference. He seems like a chill dude. Seems like a good guy. The way he answers a question, seems like a very respectful guy. It seems like, and I can see why players like playing for him. So, a huge fan of Brian Daboll. He's a guy that's had a lot of success as a coach, not just as a head coach, but as an assistant coach. So, I'm rooting for the New York Giants this year, and we'll see what happens. Also brought in, I forgot to mention Darren Waller at tight end. Darren Waller, excellent. Has been an excellent tight end the last couple years, some down years, but can he get back to the 2020 type of season when he was a Pro Bowler? It's a guy that really turned his life around. Coming out of Raiders, took him basically out of rehab and really got some high end play out of him. So can they get high end play out of Darren Waller this year? So let's talk the Pittsburgh Steelers. So the Pittsburgh Steelers got a wide receiver core. You really gotta like George Pickens, Deontay Johnson, and who's the other guy? Why am I blank? Oh, Allen Robinson. So Allen Robinson, if you followed the NFL for some time now, Allen Robinson's been a rock solid wide receiver. He's a guy that's got some size, length. Didn't necessarily have the best year this past year for the Rams. Just played in 10 games, totaled 339 yards receiving, but I think he adds some good depth there. And Pittsburgh, the big question is, can Kenny Pickett take another step in his development? Kenny Pickett, this is a guy who I think he's a solid. He's got a solid overall skill set. I think him and Najee Harris is a kind of a fun combination in the backfield because you got Pickett, a guy who, short, mid-range accuracy is really good. Najee Harris is a really good all-around running back. So, those two in the backfield has got to give you some optimism as a Pittsburgh fan. Just hope Kenny Pickett just continues to get better. And with the improvements they made at the offensive line, drafting Broderick Jones, in the first round, and then also in the draft, Jory Porter second round. So they've done some nice things in the draft. Hopefully that the offensive line is continue to improve, and it looks more like a classic, really good Pittsburgh Steelers offensive line. And Najee Harris will have big holes to run through, and Kenny Pickett will be well protected, especially on the on the edges. But yeah, Pittsburgh, it's to me this is a typical. The roster kind of has the makeup of more of a typical Pittsburgh team, especially, getting Broderick Jones and Joey Porter. You know that you got, that you're going to be pretty rock solid. This is going to be a team it's going to be competitive. Even if they don't make the playoffs like this past year, Pittsburgh seems like they're still going to be in the mix. Mike Tomlin is a really good motivator, and he does seem to get the most out of his guys. Still got Minkah Fitzpatrick, one of the best safeties in football. Yeah, I mean, Pittsburgh, they've got talent defensively. Cameron Hayward's still going strong. So yeah, Pittsburgh, a lot of pieces in place for a solid season. We'll see how things unfold for the Steelers. So yeah, some players I wanted to touch on. An interesting guy. So CBS Sports came out with overvalued players on each NFC team. Drake London was one of those guys. Drake London is interesting because you saw last year, especially I thought early in the year, I forgot that at the end of the year he turned it back on. You saw like a 90 some yard receiving game. Then he had 120 yards versus Baltimore. You saw really flashes of what Drake London his high end potential. Can he just be more consistent? Can he become more of a red zone threat? Just 4 touchdowns. I don't think it's fair to call him overvalued at this point. I think this is a very telling year for Drake London. I always say that year 2 for a wide receiver is very telling. Can Drake London in year 2 continue to build off of some of the positives in year 1, and because he's got a good all-around skill set. Honestly, Drake London, he's got size. He can go up and get the ball. He's a really good athlete. The route running is fairly crisp. He's a guy that can work the middle of the field. He's got good hands. You see the 50-50 catches, which is weird. I'm surprised he didn't have more touchdowns this year. I think a lot of it was just a little bit of opportunity. I don't think they threw to him as much in the red zone as I thought. But yeah, Drake London, this is a guy who's going to be certainly a year 2 guy to watch. And I've talked about this on some of my YouTube shorts. That London will be a fascinating guy to watch in year 2, and he's a guy that, is Drake London going to be a guy that becomes a top 10, maybe top 15 receiver in the NFL? Maybe not, but I think he is a guy that could become a strong number 1 in Atlanta. So it'll be fun to see what he does in year 2. And I don't think he should be referred to as overvalued. I think this year is going to be really telling. Some of the other ones, they had James Conner for the Cardinals. James Conner is kind of a guy that I don't really. To me, I'm not a huge fan of James Conner's skill set. He's a tremendous story, obviously coming out of college, but to me, James Conner is a backup running back. I think, he is a guy that. I think his stats have been respectable just because he does have a pretty good mix of speed and power. And, I was surprised his yards per carry has been like 4.3, which has been, fairly solid. But yeah, this is a guy who really a backup in the NFL, and just based off of opportunity and, I guess opportunity and, his enough mix of speed and power in an offense that, is kind of spread out and he's got enough pass catching ability where he was able to kind of maximize his skill set. But to me, I agree with this. I think James Conner is overvalued. I think he is, even though he has a fairly good all-around skill set, I don't think there is a lot of high-end upside for him. I don't think he is a guy that you want to consistently pound the rock with for, multiple games or even one game. But he is a guy that I think, when Arizona's offense was really clicking, especially the pass, and they were spreading it out, I think he did take some pressure off, Kyler Murray and the Cardinals and open up some of, at least make teams respect the run game. I think that's what James Conner did bring to the table. But yeah, I wanted to talk some of the top players under 25. So I didn't write any of these down, but I just wanted to go through some guys. So I got to start with my guy, Ja'Marr Chase. And yeah, I'll just say this about Ja'Marr Chase. He's one of my favorite players. This is a guy who, Ja'Marr Chase, like everyone says, this is a guy that came in the NFL and he just looked like he belonged, I mean, this guy, he was one of those guys where it looked like he was NFL ready in that 2019 season as just a true sophomore, and then obviously opted out in 2020. But I remember, it's funny. This is why I need to trust my first instinct, because I remember watching LSU versus Texas in that 2019 Week 2 game, and I'm going, who is that number one? This is before I knew who Ja'Marr Chase was. I know he played a little bit in 2018. I'm like, who's that number one? I like that guy. And then I saw Jefferson, Terrence Marshall. I'm like, I like number one. I like that Ja'Marr Chase kid. And, as we get going, I kind of, second guessed, especially when he came out in the draft, I was like, do I like, maybe Jalen Waddle? Do I like Devontae Smith more? And, all along it was the first guy I kind of fell in love with was Ja'Marr Chase. So the point I'm trying to make is I noticed the upside in Ja'Marr Chase. I overthought it a little bit, but the pick was interesting for the Bengals, and turned out it was an awesome pick for the Bengals, taking him 5th overall, reuniting him with Joe Burrow, and stats were down a little bit this year, was injured, but yeah, I mean Ja'Marr Chase, this guy is when you think of competitor, Ja'Marr Chase is one of the first few guys that comes to mind. So excellent wide receiver, and we'll see what Ja'Marr Chase has in store this year. The former first-round pick in 2021 NFL draft. We'll see what he does in year 3 for the Bengals. So yeah, Penei Sewell, also another guy in the under top 25. Penei Sewell, maybe I'm just a Lions homer, but I'll say this. I think Penei Sewell has a case for one of the top tackles in the NFL. He blocked Micah Parsons this year. I mean, there's not a lot of human beings on earth that can block Micah Parsons, and Penei Sewell did that. Sewell, just a stud, beast, monster. I mean, he's so good. He's just an excellent run blocker. I mean, I would say he's elite run blocker, very good pass protection. He's a tremendous athlete. He's a guy that's just, when he gets in an athletic position, gets his hands on you, I mean, it's pretty much over. I mean, this guy is excellent play strength. It's all around very good, and there's definitely some elite traits in Sewell's game. This guy that's ultra competitive too, a guy that does not want to come off the field. I think, the Lions took him off the field one play, and he was saying, would you bring me off the field? This is a guy that just, he through and through is a fierce competitor. He's a gamer, gets after it. So I love what Penei Sewell brings, and he's an anchor on the Lions offensive line. He's going to be in Detroit for a long time. He's going to get a nice payday coming up. So yeah, I mean, some other guys, Justin Jefferson too. Justin Jefferson, I don't really need to break him down too often. If you watch the Vikings, if you watch Justin Jefferson, you know that how much attention this guy draws, how much of an impact he makes. Jefferson, just a freak of nature, guy that can work the slot, play on the outside, former teammate of Chase at LSU. So yeah, I love Justin Jefferson. I mean, excellent hands, terrific route runner. And it's cool that he takes pride in being a really good route runner, because you see a lot of these guys that have the athleticism and speed, quickness that Justin Jefferson has. They don't always take pride in the route running. To me, Jefferson is a guy I think takes a lot of pride in route running and his releases off the line of scrimmage. Not that other really good receivers don't. Not that other really overall athletic receivers don't, but especially with Justin Jefferson, I think he really does. So yeah, I wanted to touch on talk Green Bay Packers. So yeah, I was listening to Matt LaFleur's press conference from a couple months ago, and it sounds like Matt LaFleur is super excited, it sounds like he was. I'd say, let me do a 360. It sounds like he was a little disappointed in Quay Walker. The way he handled a couple situations, letting the emotions get in the best of him when he pushed the referee, and then what was the other play? He shoved I think he shoved a coach or something. But yeah, Quay Walker, I think he understand. I like the way Matt LaFleur approached that. He goes, I think it's one thing to dislike a player's actions, but still like the player. I like the way he was sticking up for Quay Walker, but because they really need Quay Walker. I think, I don't think he's necessarily a bad guy. I think that Matt LaFleur understands that if the Green Bay Packers are going to have success moving forward, that Quay Walker is going to be one of those key young players for them. So, yeah, they need him to really get focused, and they can't have that mistakes again. And I like that someone asked, is this something that you talk about every day to your players? And Matt LaFleur says absolutely. So it's cool that it seems like a really good guy. It seems like he's a hard worker, disciplined coach. So it sounds like he's going to preach that every day and make sure that they don't have that same mistakes. And because mistakes like that can be costly, and it proved to be fairly costly in that Detroit Lions game. So yeah, Matt LaFleur, really good coach, really good guy. So yeah, it's cool the way he talked about that and handled that situation. So yeah, it was announced the New York Jets are going to be on Hard Knocks. So I'm super pumped for this to get to see. Hopefully, we get to see Aaron Rodgers. I'm hearing people saying he doesn't want to get on camera. But yeah, I feel like Aaron Rodgers, you got to be on camera a few times. You got to. I want to see. People are going to be begging to see that, because that is the story. Let's be honest. The New York Jets, Ahmad Gardner, Garrett Wilson. I know they got young talent. Robert Saleh is a good coach. He's passionate, hardworking. But Aaron Rodgers is the story in New York. So I want to see some Aaron Rodgers camera time selfishly, and I know a lot of people do too. But yeah, the New York Jets, they're going to be fun, and I like the way. Listening to Aaron Rodgers' press conference, I like the way he talked about his teammates, Garrett Wilson and Sauce Gardner. Referred to Sauce Gardner as the best corner in the NFL, and I agree with that. I don't see why not. I think he was my highest graded guy. I have no problem with someone putting him at number one. He has Garrett Wilson up there as one of the best receivers. I think Garrett Wilson, maybe he is a tad overrated as far as like next year, if he has a year like this year, I'm sure some people could say he's a top 5 to 10, but I think he's more of a guy who's got a good skill set, but I think he combines it with the elite competitiveness. I think that's why, some people consider him like one of the, maybe there is some people making the case that he's an elite receiver. I think he's a good receiver, but I'm not ready to say he's going to become a top 5, top 3 receiver in the NFL. But Garrett Wilson, a good player nonetheless. And I like the way Aaron Rodgers talked about those guys. It's cool the way Aaron Rodgers talked about his teammates. Sounds like he's really excited with a lot of what some of the younger guys are going to do. He wants talking about Breece Hall. Breece Hall, I'm excited to see him fully healthy. He's a talented running back that they took in the 2022 draft. Tore his ACL or Achilles, but they're going to have him back. And yeah, he was talking about Michael Carter in their secondary, who's a good player. C.J. Mosley had a really nice season. LaMarcus Joyner. So the Jets, they have done a really good job. Joe Douglas has done an excellent job of just getting talent into this New York Jets football team. And you hopefully the offensive line, you get a healthy Mekhi Becton, healthy Elijah Vera Tucker. I think the offensive line, I think, has enough pieces to be solid. Is this going to be a top 5, top 10 unit? No, but I think they have enough in place where they can really give Rodgers some time and do some nice things overall. So, yeah, New York Jets going to be certainly a fun team to watch. They will be the 2023 Hard Knocks. I just love watching Hard Knocks. I think it's a really cool show. It gets me fired up. Especially around that time when you're begging for football, and you just get a little dose on Tuesday nights of Hard Knocks. You get the narrator in the deep booming voice, and he's just getting you pumped up for football. So yeah, it's something that really takes the edge off while you're just dying for some football. But yeah, so let's talk. Let's talk the Detroit Lions a little bit. So with Detroit this year, I think I've talked about they need to get off to a fast start. How much does Jamison Williams being out 6 games affect him? Can Amon-Ra? I think another question: Can Amon-Ra continue to play at a high level? St. Brown, excellent season last year. Can he continue that? I think the offensive line is going to be really good. Can they stay healthy? Is the main question. They need Frank Ragnow to play all 17 games. I know that's. That might be asking a lot, consider Frank Ragnow seems to miss time in each season, but they need him out there. He's an excellent center, arguably the best center in football. Can Jared Goff sustain a high level of play, and can Goff avoid the costly turnovers? Like I cannot get the Dallas game out of my head, and that's the thing. Lions fans, a lot of them are for Jared Goff. I like Jared Goff. I think what he did this year was good, but there's some things that's one thing I've talked about. I cannot get that fumble out of my head against Dallas, and he's had games like that where there is some seriously costly turnovers where he's just holding on to the ball and just lets a guy come in and strip the ball, and that's sitting in the pocket, not feeling any sort of pressure is bad for a couple reasons. Number one, you're going to have turnovers like that happen, or number two, you're just going to get absolutely annihilated, especially with Micah Parsons coming off that corner. He really wants to just annihilate you. So that's not good for a multitude of reasons. And that's what's tough about Jared Goff. I mean, he actually is a pretty good athlete, but the guy is he's never really had great pocket awareness. That is the downfall of Jared Goff. So that is going to be interesting with Goff. I think Jahmyr Gibbs, controversial first round pick, but Jahmyr Gibbs, despite what you want to say about Jahmyr Gibbs, the guy has upside. You cannot deny that. This guy has legitimate speed, burst. He can break tackles. He can make catches out of the backfield. So whatever hot take anyone wants to have about the Jahmyr Gibbs pick, it's a guy that certainly has some upside, and I think will really help him. Jack Campbell, the linebacking core. Jack Campbell. How much does Jack Campbell play? Does he beat out Anzalone? Do they go with? Is it or does he go? Do they bump Anzalone to the other linebacker and they move? Or they play Campbell over Rodriguez? I guess who are going to be the two starters in the linebacking core? Do they start? You got to believe they're probably going to start out with Anzalone and Rodriguez, unless Campbell comes in and is just that dominant. But the one question about Jack Campbell is, does this guy have the kind of the killer? Does he kind of have that killer to be? To play reckless. In college, you didn't necessarily see him play a whole lot of reckless, and I think you need that to succeed in the NFL. Rodriguez certainly has that. Anzalone, you see a little bit of that, but I think Anzalone is kind of lacking overall, athleticism. I think Anzalone is a guy who, he's a tough player, but I don't see a lot of high-end level traits in his game. But Jack Campbell, though, he checks all the boxes as far as things you want in a linebacker, except for the complete recklessness. Because Jack Campbell, he's got good size at 6'4", 6'5". He's got length. He can take on blocks. He can read plays quickly. He can shoot gaps. So there's a lot of things to like about Jack Campbell, and you see why the Lions were a huge fan of this guy. But the big question mark is he going to start? How much does he play? So, yeah, Jack Campbell, it'll be interesting to see what happens there. The Lions secondary, it's going to be one of the more fun secondaries to watch. Cam Sutton, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, and who's the other guy? Emmanuel Mosley. Yeah, so they have some dudes in the secondary. It was one of those things. This went from what was potentially going to be a weak secondary to one of the stronger units in the NFL. And then at safety, you got like I mentioned, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. Still got Tracy Walker. So yeah, this defense, hopefully, even if this isn't like an elite defense, can this defense just be good enough where it can be a good complement to the offense, and they can not put the offense in big holes where they have to make a they have to keep scoring to stay in the game, like the Seattle game. So hopefully this defense really takes a step in the right direction and continues to improve. But let's talk New England Patriots. So, that is the big question. Bill Belichick, since Tom Brady's left, that is a question mark of, it looks like it was a lot more of Tom Brady's success as opposed to Bill Belichick's. So the question is, say New England goes sub 500, do they move on from Bill Belichick? New England kind of a team that's in a tough situation because they're just thirsting for some high-end level players. Mac Jones, the more I watch of Mac Jones, the more I like him. Coming out of Alabama, I wasn't crazy about him, but you do see some pocket awareness. He is a fairly good athlete. He is, short to intermediate accuracy is very good. Does he need to be a little bit more consistent, clean up some turnovers? Absolutely. But yeah, Mac Jones has got a skill set I like, and I think he is the quarterback of the future in New England. But yeah, the defense has some pieces, but you just don't. It's kind of more of a, they have all their pieces are more so kind of just a good, solid, cohesive unit. There's not really, one dominant guy. They drafted maybe Christian Gonzalez at corner does become an elite corner, but it's one of those things where how much, if say you have with a good, solid team around you, how much can an elite corner really make a difference on your defense? It seems like when the Rams won the Super Bowl, it seems more so like Aaron, having a superstar defensive tackle made having an elite corner even more of an asset because they complement each other well. Because Aaron Donald, when he was getting a pass rush, was helping was even giving Jalen Ramsey more of a boost. So you got to think if, say New England had an elite edge rusher, I think that would help the Christian Gonzalez pick even more so. I know they took Keion White, an edge rusher from Georgia Tech, but Keion White, even though I like Keion White as a player, I don't think he has a whole lot of upside as being a dominant edge rusher. I think this is a guy that I think will be a good, solid starter, but, they have a lot of good, solid starters. I know you could argue Matt Judon's a good player. I like Matt Judon, but he is not. Is he a feared elite edge rusher? Is he Myles Garrett, Nick Bosa? No. So New England, they're a good cohesive defense. I guess they've done some work to try to improve this receiving core. Brought in Keyshawn Boutte in the draft from LSU. It's a guy who, if you rewind to last year, was being talked about as maybe being a first-round wide receiver. So New England, there's things in place for them to do some nice things, be competitive, get back to the playoffs, but there also kind of is a lot of with New England, I feel like you're kind of searching for something to really spark the flames here. So, yeah, New England, it'll be interesting to see how they do this year, and we'll see how Christian Gonzalez does, and we'll watch how Belichick approaches this season, and can Mac Jones keep improving, keep getting better. So that'll be the big. Those will be the big questions, kind of the storylines for New England. But yeah, so NFL news. Rumors out there that Washington might trade for Malik Willis. So they got Sam Howell and Jacoby Brissett. So that would be interesting. I think that Malik Willis, to me, I think he's a little bit of a forgotten about guy. I think Malik Willis still has a chance to be a pretty good player. A guy that's legitimately got a good running quarterback. Can he develop as a passer? Can he be effective? Does Washington have enough talent if they trade for him for them to have some upside? So I think is the question there. But so let's talk LA Rams. So with the LA Rams, Sean McVay. Sean McVay is one of my favorite coaches. I'll just say this. I think Sean McVay is an outstanding guy. I think he works hard. He competes. He's a guy that really just gets after it. I think winning means a lot to him. This guy that, it's got to be tough that the Rams, he'll never say they're in a rebuild, but it has got to be a tough spot for him. This is a guy that, his competitiveness, his energy has got to be, it's a really tough position the LA Rams are in, just getting rid of first round picks like they're nothing. I mean, I know you still have Aaron Donald. Hopefully Matthew Stafford's healthy. Jordan Fuller's a nice player at safety. I think Bobby Brown, the other defensive tackle, did some nice things. So yeah, I mean, the Rams, it's not a complete lost cause. Cooper Kupp, he's also you hope he's healthy too. So with the LA Rams, there is a lot of pieces there, but you just hope that. You hope for health. You hope that things come together. You hope some of these rookies kind of live up to expectations. I know it's not necessarily lofty expectations necessarily, but I look at a guy like a couple guys like Byron Young, Kobe Turner. I mean, defensive tackles they drafted. Byron Young, and actually both kind of have the versatility to play, defensive end. 4 or 5 technique. I don't know if you necessarily want to ask them to do that consistently, but they can do it. But those are guys who, you hope one of those guys can at least become a good, solid starter and be like a kind of a staple inside, really take some pressure off Aaron Donald. You saw that's when Aaron Donald was most effective years ago when they had Ndamukong Suh. So can Byron Young, Kobe Turner, Turner out of Wake Forest, Young from Alabama. I forget exactly where they drafted him. I think Young went 4th round. I forget where they got Turner, but anyways, can either of those guys make a big impact? Sounds like McVay talked a little bit about both of them, so hopefully they have a nice season for him. Steve Avila was another guy. Interior guard they took out of TCU. It sounds like they're moving him at left guard and right guard. He definitely has the versatility to play both, maybe even could play tackle. So yeah, Steve Avila. This is a guy who, he's not going to wow you athletically, but this is a guy who's got some aggression, got some nastiness to him. He's a big, physically imposing guy. He's a, big, thick, wide body. I don't think he plays with the best leverage, but he's a guy that when he gets his hands on you, he can move you, and he is an effective run blocker, whether he's man blocking, zone blocking. So yeah, I mean Steve Avila overall, I think what did they take him 2nd round? I think that was good value for drafting Steve Avila. I think he's a good player. I think he has a chance to start right away for the Rams. I think he'll make an impact on this team. Even if it's not next year, I think in sometime in the future. But yeah, what else did I want to talk about with the Rams? So Tutu Atwell too is another guy that Sean McVay has been referencing that looks good. Atwell was a guy coming out of Louisville. A lot of people liked a couple years ago. He's going to enter year 3. Didn't really play much his rookie year. 13 games played this year. Made 4 starts. There's a lot to like about Atwell's game. A guy that's going to thrive in the slot. He knows how to get open. He's got good body control. Fairly effective route runner. Shows some leaping ability. Fairly good hands. So, yeah, I mean, good all around skill set that Atwell has. We'll just see if number 1, does he get more opportunity this year? Number 2, can he stay healthy for this full 17 game slate? So things to like about Tutu Atwell. We'll see what happens for him this year. But yeah, we'll talk the 49ers. So yeah, I listened to Kyle Shanahan's press conference from a month ago. So Kyle Shanahan, I didn't realize that he's kind of a guy that, his how he looks doesn't really match his personality. I thought he was more of a kind of I don't know how to say this. It seemed he is kind of more of a straightforward, intense, type of guy. He's kind of got like a dry sense of humor. But I respect Kyle Shanahan a lot. I think he's one of my favorite coaches. I love the way he calls plays. Love the way he knows how to utilize his playmakers like Debo. And I really like Kyle Shanahan a lot, and I think he's a tremendous coach. I think he has an argument for maybe the best offensive play caller in the NFL. I think he is a genius in that regard. So, but yeah, Shanahan. Yeah, listening to his press conference, it sounds like he's pretty optimistic. Especially for Brock Purdy, Sam Darnold. It sounds like they like Sam Darnold a lot. It sounds like they're going to go with all 3 quarterbacks: Purdy, Darnold and Trey Lance. I know a lot can change. I know there's rumors swirling around that they might trade Trey Lance, so we'll see what happens there. But yeah, 49ers, this is one of my favorite rosters. You know, 49. I'm not a 49ers fan necessarily, but it's a fun team to watch. I mean, any team that's anchored by a stud edge rusher and an outstanding freakish linebacker, it's always a defense that is must-see TV. You know, just like the Cowboys, Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence. You know, I know Parsons is going to play a little D-end, but it's fun to have a really good defensive end and a really good linebacker. And they arguably have, well, they have a top 3 defensive end, and I would say Fred Warner is the best linebacker in football. The dude is just a freak. He just has a just incredible feel for the game. Not only does the athletic measurements jump off the tape with Fred Warner, he just is he just reads plays, reads quarterbacks, guy that can good against the run, really does it all for the 49ers defense. And so, yeah, Trent Williams still going strong. Trent Williams is, I don't have to say a whole lot. You know, if you watch Trent Williams, this guy that's been one of the best tackles in football for a long, long, long time. And, Trent Williams just, you talk about grown man strength. You talk about everything you want in an offensive tackle. That's Trent Williams. This guy is an absolute monster. I mean, just complete matchup nightmare as far as, any defensive end he's going against is pretty much getting shut down. Got some nastiness finish to him. And, Trent Williams, I think, I don't exactly, I was pretty young when he came into the league. But if, at the time, drafted by Washington, if Washington knew what they were getting, I think, that would, they would, be excited to make that pick all over again. Even if they knew they were, with Trent Williams, they weren't super good, but I think they would still be excited to make that pick. And 49ers, fortunate to have this guy as still an anchor on the offensive line, just an absolute animal. But yeah, I think 49ers going to be really good once again. Some of the things they did in the draft, took Ronnie Bell later, wide receiver out of Michigan. I think Ronnie Bell gives them I think he's a nice compliment to what they have. He's another slot guy. Plug him in, can make good hands, can make some run after the catch ability. So yeah, I mean, and also 49ers free agency, Javon Hargrave. Hargrave. When I watch Hargrave's highlights, you really get appreciation for the skill set this guy has. He can get off the ball quickly, strong at the point of attack. He's got really good pass rushing ability. I didn't realize what a good pass rusher he has. He really could get after quarterbacks, and he's athletic enough to jump up, deflect passes. So Hargrave, a really nice player too. So you look at the 49ers, I mean, it's a really fun roster, and they're gonna have a chance to be real good again this year. Is this the year they get back to the Super Bowl? I think they certainly have a shot, but some things to follow. What happens with Trey Lance? How good do the 49ers, how good they end up being? Do we see Sam Darnold at all? Some interesting things going on with the 49ers, and there's certainly going to be a team that's likely going to be in the mix later in the playoffs, and it's certainly going to be in the Super Bowl conversation. So yeah, we'll shift to the Eagles. And yeah, the Eagles are one of my favorite rosters. Howie Roseman, I think, the way I like Kyle Shanahan is similarly I like Howie Roseman. I think Howie Roseman's the best GM in football. I think people were making jokes about them drafting all the Georgia guys, but it really was. I don't know if that's not necessarily obviously their plan. They just wanted to take best available, and they thought those guys were the best available. So I thought Nolan Smith at that point in the draft was a really good pick. It does make you question though why so many teams did pass on Nolan Smith. Excuse me. Is there something we're missing about Nolan Smith? I think that he was a guy who, to be fair, my initial instinct with Nolan Smith was I was not super high on him. I thought maybe he was just going to be like a speed rusher. But then I started to grow to really like Nolan Smith and really gained an appreciation for his skill set. I think he has really good power. He's a guy that can bend, super good athlete. You saw at the combine. I mean, jump out of the gym, 4.39 speed. So yeah, Nolan Smith, he's got a chance to make a big impact for the Philadelphia Eagles. You know, the linebacking core, a little bit of a question, but yeah, I mean, Eagles overall really, really rock solid. Not just rock solid, it's a really, really good roster. And the offensive line is going to be great once again. Lane Johnson. So yeah, I mean, the Eagles are going to be a good team. Nick Sirianni, really good football coach. He's had a lot of success there. So yeah, the Eagles are going to be a good team, and they're going to be in the mix to get back to the Super Bowl. So yeah, let's shift here to let's talk the Raiders. So the Raiders signed Jimmy Garoppolo to a lot of money, which is a little bit questionable. Raiders still have Josh Jacobs there. They still have Max Crosby, one of my favorite players. Drafted Tyree Wilson in the draft. Tyree Wilson was one of my favorite players. That was one of my favorite draft picks in the entire draft. I think you got to love the upside of Tyree Wilson. And I think the Raiders do have a vision of what Max Crosby and Tyree Wilson playing at a high level could be. So the Raiders, pretty good draft overall. I really like what they did. Also took the tight end out of Notre Dame, Michael Mayer. I think Mayer could make an impact for him right away. I think this is a guy that long-term is going to be a really nice fit for him. He has a good all-around skill set. Even if you're not a believer in the high-end upside this guy has, he can catch, he can block. He really does look the part. They're making jokes about Michael Mayer in high school, looked like a guy in a movie that was acting as a high school football player. That's what they were making jokes about Michael Mayer in that regard. But yeah, Michael Mayer, besides the joke, I think has a chance to be a good football player, and they need him to kind of fill that role and be really good since they moved on from Darren Waller. But yeah, defensively, the Raiders, they drafted a lot of secondary pieces. Trayvon Merrick, Nate Hobbs. Those guys have been pretty good. I think Merrick does have some upside. Nate Hobbs has shown that he can be a really good player. It's a guy that mostly plays in the slot. So yeah, the Raiders, talented roster for the most part. The offensive line, pretty solid, even though they completely whiffed essentially on Leatherwood a couple years ago. Raiders offensive line, pretty solid, led by Colton Miller. So if you look at the Raiders as a whole, I mean, you gotta kind of like some of the things they have. Hunter Renfro's a really good slot too. Still got Devontae Adams, who's arguably the best receiver in football. So even if you don't jump out of your chair when you're scanning the Raiders depth chart, you do like a lot of the pieces that this team has, and how they perform this year is it's going to be interesting. Jimmy Garoppolo, what can he do with this team is the big question mark for the Raiders. How far can he get this team? You saw Derek Carr do a lot of good things with the Raiders, but really could not get them to that next level where they're winning multiple playoff games or getting in that Super Bowl discussion. So I'll transition. That gets me let's talk the New Orleans Saints. So the New Orleans Saints, you got to start talking about the secondary. This secondary is going to be really good. Tyrann Mathieu, Paulson Adebo, a guy I really like. I think Adebo is one of the more underrated players in the National Football League. Marshawn Lattimore hopefully is healthy. Lattimore, when he's healthy, he's a top 5, top 8 corner. Arguably top, you could make the case that he is a top 3 corner, but New Orleans Saints going to have a really nice secondary. Derek Carr, that's one of my favorite storylines. And I've not been if you've watched this channel for a while, I guess I haven't talked about this a ton. I have not been the biggest Derek Carr fan, but I'll say this. New Orleans seems like a really good fit for Derek Carr just because it's an organization with some stability. Not that the Raiders is a complete dumpster fire, but it's an organization with some stability. You have a pretty solid offensive line. I know it's not as good as it was a couple years ago. You got talent at running back, on paper, you have a nice receiving core. Hopefully, Michael Thomas stays healthy. Hopefully, Chris Olave continues to move in the right direction. So, good offensive line, pretty solid running back. solid receiving core. The defensive line's okay, but they're starting to rebuild it. You saw them taking Isaiah Foskey, Brian Bresee. The linebacking core is good. I would say it's good overall. Demario Davis is a nice player. I think Pete Warner he's been a nice piece overall. So the New Orleans Saints they check all the boxes as far as a team that should make the playoffs. We'll just see how it comes together. Is going to be very interesting. And I'm curious to see how the New Orleans Saints look early on. Why I say early on, because I feel like when teams that didn't make the playoffs one year and then next year they do, I feel like early on is very telling for how that team's going to go. I mean, look at the Jets this year. Yeah, I know the Jets didn't make the playoffs. Maybe that's not the best example, but you saw right away that the Jets were a different football team this year. And they didn't make the playoffs. I know I've said that multiple times, but the Jets, they felt different. Joe Douglas, they were hitting on the draft. You saw right away Sauce Gardner immediately belonged, and he was immediately a top 3 corner in the NFL. Garrett Wilson looked like he belonged immediately, was a top 15, top 20 receiver in the National Football League. I know the offensive line is banged up. You want Mekhi Becton back, but the Jets immediately look like a team that belong following a tough, disappointing year. So how will the Saints do this year? Dennis Allen, even though I'm not crazy about him as a head coach. I know he doesn't really have a big sample size for you to nitpick from. But the Saints overall, year two of Dennis Allen, in year two of Dennis Allen, are a team that you feel pretty confident about. So let's transition to another team people feel pretty confident about. It's the Miami Dolphins. So the big question mark, are the Dolphins going to sign Dalvin Cook? Dalvin Cook is, despite the running back market, Dalvin Cook still a talented running back. And this is a guy who certainly has some upside. You saw in Minnesota, even though he was not necessarily the main reason why Minnesota won a lot of games. Like he didn't always have some key game-changing runs that put games away. Dalvin Cook was still a really nice piece to the Minnesota offense. So the Dolphins, to me, the Dolphins have done a good job of getting the splash signings. You feel like Dalvin Cook would be the icing on the cake to all the splash signings, if you will. Like Dalvin Cook could come into the Dolphins, and he could, number one, he could be hungry, and number two, he could just really add to that add to how dynamic this offense is. I mean, you might as well just keep pushing that identity. So, like if you're Mike McDaniel, you're the Dolphins, you've already pushed that identity of we want speed at the skill position. So you might as well bring Dalvin Cook in, continue that identity of speed, explosion, acceleration. So yeah, to me, Dalvin Cook to the Miami Dolphins makes a lot of sense. We'll see if that gets done. But yeah, the Dolphins, they are the winner of the splash signings. Jalen Ramsey had excellent skill set, even though if you could argue he still lost a step. This guy is still a very good athlete. He's a guy that's going to compete, can help some of the young guys continue to get better. Having him and Xavier Howard, I think they complement each other well, because Howard, even though he's a really good coverage guy, man-to-man, he's not really as much of a blitzer. You can have Jalen Ramsey is more of a blitzer, a good tackler. Not that Howard can't tackle, but I think they complement each other in that regard, that Xavier Howard's a guy that can cover, and then you got Jalen Ramsey, a guy that can blitz and will be feisty against the run. So I like that they complement each other in that regard. Some other guys I like, Raekwon Davis. They drafted Cam Smith, too, from South Carolina. Cam Smith will be in the mix to get playing time. Like I've touched on with Cam Smith, he's a guy that as I watch more and more tape on him, I really gain more and more of an appreciation for his game. I think this is a guy who, he's got some size, some length. He's competitive. I think he'll fit right in there with Ramsey and Xavier Howard. But yeah, the Dolphins, that's one thing. I'll say this: if I was the Dolphins GM, I would sacrifice some of my skill and weapons. I'm not sure. I don't want to get into the details of who specifically. I would give up a little bit just to improve that offensive line. I've wanted to see the Dolphins have an offensive line. I wish they've taken more of an initiative to improve that offensive line because, I mean, it's going to be their offensive line might not be bad. I know a couple years ago it was really bad, but there's just not. You feel like there's just not enough talent on the offensive line for this to be a really good not even really good, for this to just be a solid cohesive unit. I mean, Eichenberg's been okay. Austin Jackson's a guy that's underachieved. I know a few years ago their identity with Brian Flores was, quick passing, and that's still kind of what Mike McDaniels is. Quick throws. We don't really need our offensive line to do much, but what's the expression? As much as things change, as much as the more things change, the more they stay the same. With the Miami Dolphins, they're trying to, the Miami Dolphins, they have the makeup of the modern football. Speed at receiver, quarterback who's is accurate, can get the ball quickly in Tua. Speed at running back, a young coach. They fit that mold, but look at still the top teams in football still have an identity in the trenches. Like I touched on, the 49ers and Eagles, all those teams, even though they have a lot of talent elsewhere, they still win a lot of games in the trenches. Like the Eagles, Jalen Carter, controversial pick, but if they hit on him, he's just going to be a huge added bonus to what they have in the trenches. And Brandon Graham's still going strong. And yeah, the Eagles' offensive line last year around this time, I was pushing for the Lions' offensive line being number one, being a Lions fan. But as I look closer at the Eagles' offensive line, you really saw, like when you look closely at it, okay, Lane Johnson, really good player, been doing it for a long time. Landon Dickerson, still a young guy, but excellent, and a guy that can play center, guard. He was an outstanding player in college. Jordan Mailata, good player. So, yeah, I mean, the pieces on the Eagles' offensive, it's not only good pieces, but a good cohesive unit as well. And you saw early last year how good the Eagles' offensive line was. Same with even with the 49ers, if you argue that there's not as much high-end players outside of Trent Williams, good cohesive unit. And, I mean, it's a good enough cohesive unit where the 49ers are a team that if Trent Williams goes down, which hopefully not, that they have enough, a good enough unified unit that they're going to be a good offensive line still. A lot of that is credit to Kyle Shanahan, but a lot of that is just, they found guys that fit a role, and Trent Williams was a guy that it's really not really put him over the top, but really helped him to take a next level up. But yeah, we'll talk Green Bay for a minute. And Green Bay drafted Luke Van Ness. And I think Luke Van Ness, there's a guy, I think they're on to something with Luke Van Ness. And I was a guy that really liked Van Ness after watching his tape. I think, people say next J.J. Watt. I'm not ready to say that as of yet, but there's a lot of similarities story-wise between Luke Van Ness and J.J. Watt. They're both guys who really good players who people have questions, and like Luke Van Ness is like he kind of just got the label as just a power player. And not that was a label for J.J. Watt, but like I think if just saying he's a power player, which I'll say that I'm not taking a shot at, all due respect Greg Cosell a lot, but Greg Cosell, I would just say he was one of the guys, I got to give him credit. He was one of the guys that said that, and I'm not taking a shot at him, but I think just calling him a power player is kind of underselling his overall skill set. He got legitimate power, and I think with more coaching, it's a guy that's still raw. With more coaching, NFL coaching, I think you can really maximize and get some high upside in this guy. And I think Luke Van Ness is a guy that will make an impact on the Packers' defensive line right away. But yeah, to say he's going to be as good as J.J. Watt, that is really high expectations. But I think he's going to have an impact that really affects opposing offenses. You saw it when he was on the field at Iowa. Teams were really concerned about this guy's power. He was super disruptive. Even when he wasn't making sacks, his bull rush and his power was affecting the pocket at a high percentage against college quarterbacks. And I remember, so I'm watching them play Michigan in the Big Ten Championship, and he didn't start, which is weird. That was one of the weird things about Luke Van Ness. He never started a game. But when they put him in the Big Ten Championship against Michigan, Michigan's offense really started to struggle. You saw that the pocket was getting collapsed really quickly. It was forcing McNamara to make some quicker decisions. It was forcing incompletions. So you saw that is what Luke Van Ness can do. And people will say, well, he can't rush with that power in the NFL. Yes, he can. If you can do that's kind of the aha moment I've had with scouting. If a guy can do something in college, there's a 99% chance he can do it in the NFL, because it's not – I know that offensive linemen are going to be better in the NFL, but physically dominating a grown man – like you saw him do it against Paris Johnson. Paris Johnson, even if you don't think Paris Johnson is a Pro Bowl Hall of Fame tackle, Paris Johnson is a really good tackle. You saw him do that to Paris Johnson. It's not like he's going to go against a lot better tackles than that. I mean, some better, but – If he can dominate Paris Johnson like that, then he can do that to most of the tackles in the NFL. So Luke Van Ness is certainly a guy to watch for the Green Bay Packers. The two Georgia guys, Devontae Wyatt, Quay Walker, certainly guys to watch. Cornerback Jair Alexander, super talented. How Jordan Love does is going to be fun to see. Jordan Love was a guy who many people liked a few years ago, but he was kind of a guy that there was concerns, and now he's going to really get his opportunity to show what he can do this year. He's a guy you see the arm talent. Green Bay receiving core, I mean, it's improving. You hope that that's a receiving core that takes another step this year. Christian Watson was a guy from North Dakota State, they drafted, who started to emerge as the season went on. Romeo Doubs is another nice player. The running back. Running back is pretty solid. Aaron Jones is a good player. Defensive, back to the defense. Is it a great defense? No, but I think Green Bay has a good enough defense where if this offense, if Jordan Love plays to the level we think we have, I think it's a defense that is good enough to make the Green Bay Packers play well. But to me, Green Bay is a team that scares me. You feel like they do have the makings of a team where the wheels can fall off, just because you lose a veteran quarterback. Even though the defense could be fairly solid again, you feel like there's not enough high-end players outside of, even though I just touched on it, I like Luke Van Ness, you feel like there's not enough high-end level players where they could really overcome a really poor offense. So to me, it could be if the Packers struggle, it could be a mix of Jordan Love flops, the receivers don't take another step, the defense is solid. I think the defense is going to be solid at worst. You feel like that combination could kind of create a downward spiral. And Green Bay is a team who I think now with Aaron Rodgers, you're really going to need to see them draft a lot. You're going to really need to see them start to hit big on players in the draft. Like you can't just get solid pieces. It's like when Tom Brady was in New England. You can't get away from just drafting solid starters. You're going to have to hit on some high-end level talent. And I know it's harder when you're down further in the draft, but like you still have to find high-end level players somehow. Even if that means making a trade. I know free agency's tough when you have a lot of money tied into certain guys, but yeah, you still have to find high-end level guys somehow, wherever you are, or however good you are, or whatever point in the rebuild you're in. So I'm going to wrap with that. Thanks for tuning into the Brant Parshall Show. Make sure to stay tuned for more episodes and clips from the show. Till next time, peace.